Okay, welcome back everyone to Peeling Syd Barrett. This will be episode 36, and in this episode I want to discuss the song Word Song, and I would like to discuss a little bit about Spike Hawkins, who was a poet of that era of the late 60s. He went on to write more poetry as well, and unfortunately I won't be able to go into much of his poetry because it's relatively new and under strong copyright, but I will discuss a few stories about Spike Hawkins and suggest that perhaps the method of poetic generation that Mr. Hawkins was using was something similar to what Mr. Barrett might have been using, and we'll discuss our source material, which is our two standard books, A Very Irregular Head by Rob Chapman and Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd Dark Blue by Julian Palacios. So let's go ahead and get started then. The first thing that we normally discuss is corrections, and I don't have a whole lot of corrections from the last episode. The only thing I really want to discuss is that I have repeatedly discussed the way and Mr. Barrett's use of that particular lyric for some reason. I have never gone into the idea, perhaps, that this may be a reference to Taoism, and Taoism, which is literally translated as the way. So what is the way about? Basically, it discusses the idea of a connection that is going to make life, and all movement in nature possible. So it's kind of a harmonious thought, a plan, or a way of living life that allows for movement in life. And of course, chapter 24 that Mr. Barrett was a song that Mr. Barrett made, discusses coming and going and movement, and doing so, I suppose, in a harmonious way, or as harmonious as possible. And also the idea of living life, perhaps in a harmonious way. I'm not going to go into Taoism too much. I don't consider myself to be much of an expert on it, and I really don't want to try and delve into it and take points away from it. I just want to point out that it is possible that perhaps it was influential on Mr. Barrett. And the idea of living life in a certain way, in a harmonious way, may be something that was important to him. You'll have to decide that on your own. I'm not going to say that I think it is or it isn't. I just want to point out that his repetitive use of that lyric, the way, in songs like Birdie Hop and other songs, kind of indicates that it's an important word because he's using it so often. And the way, or the way, could be an indicator that he's considering at least Taoism. That's all I wanted to say for corrections. So let's go ahead and move on then. I want to discuss the song Word Song. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into Word Song. I'll give you hopefully I can find a lyric version on YouTube. I kind of doubt I'm going to be able to find a lyric version. If I can't find one, you'll just have to look up the lyrics on your own. Now, this song first came out on the Opal album in 1988. Obviously, it was released as part of that compilation album, but it would have been recorded much earlier than that, likely in the early 70s. I'm going to suggest around 1970. I don't see an actual recorded date for this, so I don't know. But again, you have to wonder, after you hear a song like this, I would say this isn't much of a pop song. Some of the other songs on the Opal album, I think, are actually much more interesting songs. Certainly one of them is Opal, which is a great song. Even I think a lot of the general public would hear that song Opal and think, wow, that's a really great song. But Word Song, I don't think most people would really get into too much. So let's go ahead then, and I guess if you would, go check out the song and come back, or just pull up the words or the lyrics on your phone, and we're going to take a look at this. And this is going to be a little bit difficult because of the fragmented nature of this poetry. And we'll discuss the lyrics themselves, and then we'll discuss Spike Hawkins. Hopefully this won't be too long. I want to do another episode, and I want to do Did Syd Wish You Were Here? And that's going to be an important episode. So I want to spend any extra time I have this weekend, I want to spend on Did Syd Wish You Were Here? So let's get through this one and discuss a few things, and I'll discuss some things that I've noticed, and you can perhaps consider them. And come on back, and then we'll get started up. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the lyrics right off the bat. Mr. Barrett starts with a few things, and I'll just kind of make notes as we go. He starts with stained, and then glaucous, and then glycerin, and then gold, and then goat, and then plover, and then gold again, and then local, and then stocks. So right there we've changed the O sound. So we started off kind of with, I'm just looking for alliteration now. Is there something connecting these words perhaps in Mr. Barrett's head? A few notes just on things so far. One thing I will note right away is that he has said gold twice, at least according to my lyric book. And that's the only word that repeats throughout the entirety of this, which makes me think that it's a mistake. I don't think he would have intended to have said the same word twice. Now, I've read in various places that Mr. Barrett wrote down lyrics. I just want to point out that if that is true, you have to wonder which songs did he write down lyrics for. Some of the songs obviously are fairly simple songs. It would be easy to remember. I just want to point out that it would be incredibly difficult to remember words like this that don't actually tell a story and don't fit an actual structure, unless they do actually fit a structure for Mr. Barrett in some way. But if this is completely random and it's just organized by sound in some way, perhaps he's following the sound, I don't know. But if this was me, I would have to write these down to be able to run through this song. Just my opinion. So if I wrote it down, would I repeat gold? No, I probably wouldn't make that mistake. So I have to assume that when Mr. Barrett sang this song, he's probably doing it from memory, which is astonishing. I will point out that it is possible, of course, that he just made a mistake. You'll have to decide on your own which one you think is more possible. I can't say that I know. I don't know. But gold being repeated twice there and no other word being repeated makes me think it's a mistake. And if I was reading from a paper, I don't think I would make that mistake. Just my opinion. Okay, so let's look at the first few lines here. So we have an S sound, stained, and then he goes to glaucous, and then glycerin, and gold, and goat. So obviously there's a G alliteration going on there. There also is gold, goat, plover. So there's that O kind of sound, that long O sound, and then gold and local, and then it changes up to stocks. So at that point we've changed the vowel sound for some reason, I don't know. And now he uses stocks and then type and then food, wild, national lake flag, valve. So you can see there's a lot of L alliteration happening now. What all of this is intended to mean, I don't really know. We'll discuss this a little bit later, as I said, when we discuss Spike Hawkins. But wild, national, lake, flag, valve, gyroscope, sect. Okay, so there's an S and a C sound, sect and gyroscope. He continues on then with heat, helium, leg, long E, and to an A sound with the E. So heat and helium have the same long E sound. And then helium and leg share the L sound. Whether or not he's doing something there. Leg, fair, again he changes the vowel sound. State, changes it again. Invention, medieval. Oh, that's kind of an interesting kind of combination of words. Invention and medieval. Not only are they the same consonant count, or the same count for syllables of 3, but they also use the same V sound. Invention, medieval, and that's about it, really. Again, the T and the D we'll say are phonetically linked, so invention and medieval. The next is refraction, same syllable count, and then faction, and then alter and action. Now that particular combination of words, refraction, faction, alter, and action, they do feel like they're somewhat tied together in the ah sound, in the shun sound. So perhaps he's alliterating heavily there. That would be, in my opinion, that would be an easy line to remember. The lines ahead of that, I have no idea. I don't know how you would remember all those other things. The next line is hunter and then interest, bullock, and market. There's a hard K sound, bullock and market. Hunter, interest, market. Pretty loose, really, honestly. So I don't know exactly. You could fashion a story of that in your mind, that a hunter has interest in a bullock and then it goes to market. So that you can structure somewhat in your head as kind of like a story to remember. But the rest of it, the TR alliteration, I suppose. Let's move on to the next few lines. There's loads and liquids. Again, L alliteration. No vowel consistency. Neon, eaters. I just thought of something that's pretty funny. I'll have to come back to that later on. But neon, and then eaters, and then jaws, and jungle. What's going on there? I don't know. Neon, eaters, jaws, jungle. Doesn't seem connected. Main, signal, then knives and kitchen. I don't see a combination there. The next bit is ingot, lovely, mirror, and then mold, Miocene, moat. So I'll just point out that he goes ingot, lovely, mirror, mold, Miocene, moat, poppy, rubber, radar, rags, sugar, teak, silver. So he's the first letter there, he's running through almost like the alphabet. So I, L, M, 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 P, R, 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 S, T, but it's mixed in a little bit. So rags and then sugar, and of course rags and sugar are similar. They use many of the same letters. Then teak, and it goes back to silver, pug, tin, and beetroot. After beetroot is carrot, which I suppose beets and carrots are somewhat related, and then ebony, no relation. Fruit, copper, and silk. The last verse, I suppose you could say, is car, and then distant, pygmy, hid. So there we have a lot of I sounds. Distant, pygmy, hid. Pack. I guess you could say that in some ways the car and the pack, no, it's just a different sound. Of course, it has the C and the A in both, but it's reversed. So car and then pack. And that would bookend the distant pygmy hid, but I don't know. After that is timber, and then pudding and straw. Then raindrops, pattering, ramps. Again, R and D kind of RD, P and S alliteration in those. Then chameleon and prairie, pods and trigger. I don't see a connection. Museum, and then scales, square. So then you have the SK, the hard K kind of sound, but tied with the S. Ultra, and then pot of. Why it's pot of, I don't know. Map and vent. So vent, volcano, vein. Wreck, and then tactic. Title. Arches. Again, I don't see a whole lot of combination here. So volcano, vein, wreck, tactic. Of course, there's again the hard K sound that repeats. Tactic title would be combined with alliteration on the T. Arches, valley, and then hand. Inflect, and then impression. Loom. Last, molten. So loom, last, molten have the L, T, and M sound in them consistent. So again, there's alliteration with those three words. How you would tie all that together, I really don't know. In your head. U, and then gamma, meeting, then lighting and signal, and then Ireland. Why Ireland? I don't know. Perhaps, who knows, maybe that's a James Joyce reference. And then coral and cold. So there's our LK, our whole coral, cold. So the same O sound, the same C, hard C, and L sound. So that kind of ties up the alliteration there. There is alliteration happening, but kind of what is happening there, I don't totally know. How is he remembering all that? How is he tying it all together? It's very difficult to figure out. Now, I'm going to give you a few stories about Spike Hawkins, and then I'm going to discuss the song one more time. And I want to point out two things about the song. So, I'm just going to write this down really quick. Excuse me. So there's two things that I kind of want to run through with this song, and we'll discuss those after I'm done. So let's discuss a little bit about Spike Hawkins. Now, we've already kind of discussed the fact that, and by the way, I'm looking at lyrics from the Lyrics of Syd Barrett book, which I've referenced before, and I'll give you the information for it here. So let's look then at a few of my notes, I guess you could say, about Spike Hawkins, who very likely was a pretty influential person in certain songs about that Mr. Barrett put together. So the first thing I'm going to point you to is page 187 of Mr. Chapman's book, A Very Irregular Head. Now, on page 187, he relays the story of Scream Thy Last Scream, and if you remember, that was an unreleased song that Pink Floyd put together, and Spike Hawkins putting together kind of a film, a promotional film that's kind of a strange film that was supposed to be paired with that song for it to be released, and that didn't happen. So why would Spike Hawkins be picked there? Well, Mr. Barrett and Mr. Hawkins didn't know each other, and perhaps he was tabbed by Mr. Barrett to do some of the work for that video. You know, who knows? I haven't read that anywhere. I'm just guessing why he would be used. He's a poet, after all, not a photographer or a filmmaker. On page 209 is a recollection or a quote from Mr. Hawkins where he mentions how Spike was talking with Syd Barrett about Syd leaving, and how Spike mentioned that Pink Floyd had come out with some kind of cool singles. And Syd kind of mentioned that, yeah, they kind of had open doors, but in a way, he says, but not really the kinds of doors that he was trying to open. And he kind of mentions the idea of them being opened with cheap keys. You'll have to decide what that might mean on your own, but it does seem to give the impression, as we have discussed before, that perhaps Mr. Barrett felt that what Pink Floyd was doing wasn't enough. It wasn't really going as far as he wanted it to go. Now, the other thing that I would like to relay is on page 227 of the same book, is a recollection of Spike Hawkins discussing with Syd a few things and how they got together and kind of discussed poetry. Now, Instant Poetry Broth is something you can look up about Spike Hawkins, where he kind of ties together this idea of loosely organized thoughts with some kind of random placement that often sounds interesting but doesn't actually relay meaning. And it being kind of an idea of breaking up poetry and mentality in order to present things in a new and kind of an interesting way. And perhaps you could say that this is something that is happening here in Word Song. I would like to point out that a lot of people believe that Mr. Barrett is doing this a lot. Perhaps not all the time, but quite often. That he's mixing in words that just sound pleasing but don't actually mean anything. I won't say they're wrong, but I will say that, in my opinion, most of his songs have a pretty solid theme, and they're fairly easy to pick up on, and the words that he uses give impressions. They're a little bit obtuse impressions, but if I think you have a general understanding of the artist, then they do at least make sense. In this song, Word Song, he may be doing that. He may actually be combining things just based on sound, which would be kind of in line with what Mr. Spike Hawkins kind of was considering, I think you could say. Or perhaps they practiced that together, or at least discussed it. Now, on page 375 of Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd, Dark Glow by Julian Palacios, he discusses this song in particular. And he mentions that word song just kind of chooses words based on onomatopoeic value, not really for their meanings, which, of course, is just pure alliteration or perhaps some other collection, and gives the impression of what Mr. Palacios defines as kind of this stream of consciousness kind of idea. And perhaps that is happening. Perhaps Mr. Barrett is just kind of stream of consciousnessing, I don't know what you would call that, an entire song or a collection of words. Perhaps he put it together over time. I don't know. You'll kind of have to decide on your own whether or not you think that this is a stream of conscious song that loosely collects ideas. What I would like to do now is give you kind of two thoughts that I have from this song. Okay? And the first one I'm going to do because it's the easier one. The first one I want to point out to you is that this is a very difficult song to make up. And I want to point out to you that almost none of these songs are in any of Mr. Barrett's previous, none of these lyrics are in any of Mr. Barrett's previous songs. Some of them are. I'll go through and I'll point to the ones that I know are used previously. Okay? I know he uses heat before. I know he uses market. That's from Apples and Oranges. I know he uses jungle. That's an effervescing elephant. I know he uses mirror. That's from Arnold Lane. I know he uses mold. That's from If It's In You. I know he uses silver from Opal. I know, from Matilda Mother. I know he uses ebony from Opal. I know he uses distant from Opal. I know he uses pack from Wolfpack. I know he uses hand from the song, I can't remember the name of the song, but the one where he says, hiding your hand. He uses you, and that comes out to about 11 words that are used out of 106 words. So it's roughly 10%. Now, some of these, like pot of, you could break up and just say it's just pot and then of. For whatever reason, they say pot of. Now, pot was used before in Clover, Honey Pot, Yellow, or something like that. That's from Octopus or Clowns and Jugglers. So you could add that one if you chose, but you're still going to be around 10%. I challenge you to go and try to write a song or write poetry that only has 10% of the words that you've ever used before. How is he doing that? It could be that he's just picking very odd words, and that he's maybe in a way doing so. In doing so, he's not using his own natural vocabulary. Could be, he's just perhaps gone through a dictionary and cut out a bunch of words. I would like to point out that it is possible that he is deliberately picking words that he knows he has not used before, which is astonishing. I mean, he's obviously familiar with his own poetry and his own lyrics, but is he familiar to it in that much of a degree? And I'll give you another reason why he might have done so. He may have gone through and done this as a joke. Now, I did Syd Barrett Julia Dream, okay? And you can go watch that if you like. But one of the lines in the song Julia Dream is about breaking a code. I can't remember exactly. I'll put the line up here. About decoding someone's mind. So is he throwing this out as kind of like a red herring to show that there isn't actually a code? Of course, obviously, what I've been doing all this time is trying to establish a pattern of Mr. Barrett's behavior, his themes, and his word choices and usage, and his manner of delivering that. That's all destroyed by this song. Was he doing that on purpose? I don't know. It's kind of a funny idea. I won't say that it's not something that is beyond him. And we'll get into this idea also of kind of a greater joke. We did discuss already the joke of Have You Got It Yet? but I'm going to discuss another possible joke from the Wish You Were Here album. And that is quite an extensive prank or joke which required a lot of thought and planning. I have to wonder if this word song isn't deliberately made to throw people off of trying to make a code, or perhaps just to mess with them if they're trying to do that. Just a passing thought. One thing I will like to point out is something that I've noticed here is that there is a collection, or there are lines of thought within these words that seem to be pointing to previous songs. And they're not using the same words from those songs, but they are using some of the same imagery. Okay? Let me see if I can locate a few of these. So the first one is liquids, neon, eaters, and jaws. Now that has 4 words right there that remind me very much of the song Terrapin. Right? So if you remember, in the song Terrapin, there are the lyrics about fins being luminous and fangs all around a clam, and they're floating, bumping noses, dodge a tooth, fins are luminous, fangs all around the clam. So there you have some of the same ideas in word song. And you have luminous, but here we have neon in word song instead of luminous. We have floating, which of course requires a liquid, generally speaking. Eaters and jaws. Well, jaws have teeth in them. So dodging, fangs, and teeth, that has to do with jaws. So there's 4 words right there that appear to have loose connection to the song Terrapin. There are other kind of combinations here that seem to be similar. This idea of raindrops and pattering, he kind of mentions that within his song, sitting by the window and watching the rain. And there are a few others that, in my opinion anyway, kind of have a similar idea that they're tying together lighting and signal. There's another one towards the end there, lighting, signal. Meeting, lighting, signal. Well, that is basically what the song Julia Dream is about, using a light to signal someone. So, and again, I'll ask the question, did Syd Barrett Julia Dream? There's another possible reason why in that code. So, I guess that's pretty much it. That's all I really wanted to discuss. This is a relatively short one, but let's just discuss kind of what I'm planning to do for the remainder of this. I'm going to do 4 more episodes. I want to do If It's In You. I want to do Baby Lemonade. I want to draw conclusions. And then I want to have kind of a discussion about the way, which will be largely opinion on my part, I suppose. And that'll be it for pretty much for Peeling Syd Barrett. The other thing that I want to do is this, hopefully soon, I'm going to get out a Did Syd Barrett Wish You Were Here. So I'll try and get that done soon. At any rate, if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please do so. And if you give a like, it helps with the algorithm, obviously. Spread the word if you enjoy this. I want to thank people that regularly check in. So I know there are some people that regularly check in. Renewed Poet, Sifa checks in pretty regular. Jose Lamsfus checks in pretty regular. Sudasharna checks in pretty regular. Thank you guys for checking in, giving me messages, letting me know your thoughts. And hopefully you've enjoyed this and it's adding some value. And I guess that's pretty much it for this one. This is kind of a short one, but that's okay. We'll try and put out some more material in the next one. I'll talk to you later.